A veteran and his retired police dog are surrounded by bikers, and one call changes everything. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. Samuel Carter. He was 91 years old with skin weathered by time like old leather. His walk was slow but steady, as if each step carried the weight of a life lived on the edge. He wore a grey wool coat, his veteran's cap tilted with pride, and in his hand he held a hand-carved walking stick, etched with symbols no one else recognized. At his side walked Max, a German shepherd with thick fur, ears always alert, and eyes as sharp as his owner's. Max didn't need a leash. His movements matched Sam's perfectly, like they were one shadow. That day, like every Friday for the past 7 years, Sam was headed to Maggie's Diner, a small but cozy place, filled with black and white photos of soldiers, families, and memories frozen in time. Maggie, the owner, was a warm-hearted widow who always saved the same table by the window for Sam and Max. It wasn't just a routine, it was a promise. Every sip of coffee there was a quiet conversation with the past. As they walked down the street, a few neighbors peeked out their windows and greeted Sam with silent respect. Sam wasn't just any old man. He'd fought in the Battle of Frost Hollow, a war forgotten by history books, but remembered by those who lost brothers there. His name still carried weight in Willow Creek, though he never asked for praise. Max stopped suddenly, raising his head, growling softly. Sam stopped too without a word. In the distance, the roar of engines broke the morning peace. 5 motorcycles rolled down the street, loud and proud, like a parade of arrogance. Leading them was a young, muscular man with a cocky stare and dark sunglasses. His name was Jake Sullivan, known around the area as Hawk, feared for the trouble he stirred up with his biker gang. Sam didn't change his pace. Not a word, not a flinch. Max stayed even closer, letting out a low huff on high alert. As the bikers passed, one of them spat on the ground near Sam's walking stick and muttered with a smirk, "Useless, old man. Even that dog won't save you when the time comes." Max took a step toward the guy, his teeth barely showing, but Sam brushed his hand gently across the dog's back. A silent command, a sacred bond. The bikers rode off, laughing, but something in Sam's eyes hardened, like an old machine starting to hum deep inside him. He didn't say a thing, just kept walking toward the diner, knowing today wouldn't be like the others, and Max, with his steady stride, followed. More than a dog, he was Sam's guardian, his war buddy, his last shield. Maggie's Diner was already buzzing with the smell of fresh-baked bread and strong coffee when Sam and Max stepped inside. The place was small, with light wood walls and a fireplace that hadn't been lit yet, but still carried the faint, smoky scent from the day before. The tables were filled with familiar faces, retirees, homemakers, a couple of local workers. They all nodded quietly to Sam as he walked in. He nodded back. It was a silent respect, built over time and scars that never fully heal. Max settled down beside Sam's usual chair by the window, where the morning light filtered in softly. Maggie came over with a smile, her floral apron tied tight, hair pinned back, and a warm glint in her eyes whenever she saw the old veteran. "Your table's just like you left it, Sam," she said. "The usual." Sam tipped his head slightly. "Thanks, Maggie. And a bowl of water for Max, please." She nodded kindly and walked off. A few minutes later, the bell above the door jingled loudly. Heavy leather boots stomped on the wooden floor. 5 bikers strode in, still wearing their black jackets and shiny helmets. Jake "Hawk" Sullivan, leading the pack, pulled off his sunglasses slowly, scanning the room like he owned it. A thick silence fell over the diner. Even the soft music from the old jukebox seemed to fade on its own. Maggie froze halfway across the room, a tray shaking in her hands. Nobody in Willow Creek dared to stand up to these guys. Nobody but one man. Hawk walked right up to Sam's table without asking, and slammed both hands down on it. "You know, old man," he said, "some days I get tired of seeing ghosts like you, acting like you've still got something to say." Sam looked him straight in the eyes, not with anger, with a calm that felt like a bottomless well. "And some days," Sam said, "the living learn what it's like to die quietly." Hawk laughed, glancing back at his crew. One of them, a young guy with long hair and a reckless attitude named Tyler Brooks, leaned toward Max. "What about this dog?" Tyler said. "Does he think he can boss us around too?" He made a move to nudge Max with the tip of his boot. Big mistake. In a flash, Max sprang to his feet, muscles tense, teeth bared, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. He didn't attack. Not yet. He just positioned himself between Tyler and Sam, sending a clear message. One more step, and trouble's coming. Don't test him, Sam said, his voice steady. He's got better sense than most men. But the tension was already lit like a fuse. Hawk smirked, his grin crooked. Tell me, Grandpa, he said. What did you do if we decided to take over this diner? Call the army? Sam set his walking stick on the floor, then slowly pulled an old flip phone from his coat pocket. He opened it with calm precision and pressed a single number. No, he said. Not the army. Something worse. Silence. The bikers exchanged looks, half mocking, half uneasy. They didn't expect this old man to have that kind of steel in him. What they didn't know was that Sam never made empty promises, and he never dialed that number without a reason. Max stood firm at his side, like a living statue carved from loyalty. Outside the diner, the sky was shifting. Thick clouds rolled in like a warning. The air grew heavier. Something was coming. And Sam, he just waited. Outside, the sky over Willow Creek was darkening fast, almost unnaturally. Heavy, low clouds swallowed the sun, as if time itself refused to watch what was about to happen. Inside the diner, the air was thick, like it could be sliced with a knife. The only sound was the old wall clock ticking away the seconds. Jake Sullivan stood with his arms crossed, smirking but uneasy. He couldn't figure out why an old man and his dog made him feel out of place. Tyler, restless, chewed his gum hard, while the other three guys glanced out the windows, like they expected something to drop from the sky. Sam, still holding the old flip phone with its screen glowing faintly, slipped it back into his coat pocket. He didn't say another word. His silence spoke a language of its own, the kind only those who've got nothing left to prove understand. Max stayed on his feet, guarding the space between Sam and the troublemakers. His stare was ice cold, calculating. His ears pointed forward, muscles tight, body slightly crouched, ready to leap if Sam so much as blinked a command. The diner's customers weren't eating or talking anymore. They just waited. Something heavy hung in the air, something old and serious. I don't get it, Jake muttered, turning to Maggie, who stood near the counter, her hands trembling. This place turned into a ghost museum or what? She didn't answer. Her eyes, misty with unshed tears, stayed locked on Sam. And then, it came. It started as a low rumble, barely noticeable. Then it grew louder, the roar of old, powerful engines, deep and raw. These weren't the sleek bikes of the town's troublemakers. These were relics, built by experienced hands, painted matte black, marked with symbols forgotten by time. One by one, they rolled up in front of the diner. Men, older men with straight backs and eyes that told stories of trenches, mud, and lifelong promises. Their faces, lined with scars and history, stood out against the cold steel of the helmets they removed with military precision. They didn't speak. They just stood there, still as soldiers in formation. On each man's chest hung a worn medal, the Brotherhood coin. Sam finally stood up. "They're here," he said simply. The younger bikers turned to the windows, stunned, speechless. They didn't know whether to run or act tough. Tyler was the first to step back. Jake swallowed hard. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Sam walked toward the door, his walking stick tapping the floor in a steady, almost military rhythm. Max stayed at his side, not glancing left or right, tail low, but eyes burning like embers. When Sam stepped outside, he came face to face with the first man, a white-bearded figure with steel blue eyes and a deep voice. "Sam, I thought you'd never make that call," the man said, gripping Sam's hand firmly. "Didn't think I'd need to," Sam replied. "But these days, they're not for staying quiet." The group of veterans lined up, filling the street. Without raising their voices, without moving a muscle, their presence said everything. The younger bikers, caught between pride and fear, didn't know what to do. And from inside the diner, everyone knew a lesson was about to begin. Max sat beside Sam, staring down the intruders. His wet nose gleamed in the streetlight's glow, his chest rising and falling calmly. He knew the most dangerous part of a fight was the moment just before it started. Sam barely whispered, "They didn't come for a fight, they came for justice." And Max's eyes flashed in reply. Main Street in Willow Creek had turned into a battlefield of pure tension. The engines were off now, but the echo of their arrival still bounced off the walls of every house, like the town itself held its breath. In front of Maggie's diner, a perfect line of veterans stood like a human wall. They didn't talk, didn't move, didn't smile. They were just there with the kind of authority only history can give. Sam took a few steps forward, his walking stick marking the rhythm of a judgment about to land. Max walked at his left, in sync, sniffing the air, catching every vibration, every breath, every hint of intent. He wasn't there for show. He was a warning. Jake Sullivan had followed Sam outside, with Tyler and the other three trailing behind. Their swagger was gone. They stood stiff, confused, forced to face something they'd never understand. The weight of a life lived with honor. One of the veterans, a tall man with a stern face and square jaw, stepped forward. His name was William Harper, a former artillery commander, and his voice carried the weight of a verdict. "You're free to breathe because men like us walked toward death first to clear the way," he said, not shouting, but with a firmness that shook the ground. "And today you mocked one of our own." Jake swallowed hard. Tyler looked at the ground. Sam, calm as ever, turned to the young men. "What you did wasn't cowardice," he said. "It was ignorance. But if you leave here without understanding what you face today, you'll stay a threat, not just to this town but to yourselves." Max sat down. His eyes didn't leave Jake, like he was measuring the man's soul. And something inside Jake, something old and buried, started to stir. Pride, regret, fear. "What do you want us to do?" Jake asked finally, his voice barely a whisper. William stepped back. Sam spoke without a trace of emotion. "You'll apologize, one by one. You'll look every man here in the eyes, and then you'll look at Max and tell him you understand why he didn't bite when he had every right." Tyler balked. "To a dog?" Sam leaned slightly toward him. "To a soldier." Max stood up then. He walked slowly until he was right in front of Tyler. He didn't growl. He didn't show teeth. He just stared. Steady, unmovable. Tyler, frozen, swallowed hard and with a shaky voice said, "I'm sorry." One by one, the others followed. To Sam, to William, to every veteran, and finally, to Max, whose ears twitched slightly, picking up the tremble in their voices. When Jake's turn came, the silence was deafening. "I didn't know who you were, or what you'd done," he said. "I messed up. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. And you too, Max." Max dipped his head just a little, accepting the gesture. "Respect isn't demanded. It's earned." Sam didn't say a word. He just reached out to Jake and placed a small metal token in his hand. It was a brotherhood coin. Old, worn, alive. "You haven't earned it yet," Sam said, "but take it. Let it remind you where not to go back to." Jake held it like it burned. The veterans started to break their formation. Sam returned to Max's side. Nobody cheered. Nobody clapped. Because real victory doesn't make noise. And in Max's eyes, there was peace. The afternoon in Willow Creek turned golden, as if the sun wanted to touch the scars of the past with gentle rays. The breeze, softer now, carried dry leaves down the streets, and the town's usual hum was slowly coming back, like nobody wanted to disturb the sacred quiet left after the standoff. Maggie's diner, though still open, had no customers. Just one table stayed occupied. Sam sat with his back straight, but his eyes were tired. Across from him was a 17-year-old kid, lanky with sandy blonde hair and curious eyes. His name was Ethan Carter, Sam's grandson. He wore faded jeans and a button-up shirt tucked in tight. This was the first time he'd seen anything like this. His modern world of screens and impatience had cracked open under the force of a past that still pulsed with life. Max, as always, lay at Sam's feet, but this time his head rested on the old veteran's boot. His eyes followed Ethan, watching his every move with the same focus he'd have in a minefield. "Grandpa," Ethan said, breaking the silence, his voice thin. "You never told me you were that." Sam looked at him, his gaze steady, carrying truths heavier than bullets. "I wasn't a hero, Ethan," he said. "I was a young man who had to do things so others could live their youth in peace. That's all." Ethan looked down. He held the coin in his hands, the one Jake had been given but that Sam had quietly taken back after the bikers left. It wasn't a slight. It was a message. The real legacy isn't handed to those who run, but to those who stay. "What is this exactly?" Ethan asked, turning the coin between his fingers. "You say it's not worth anything, but it feels heavy." Sam nodded. "It's a brotherhood coin. Back when we served, it wasn't for showing off. It was a symbol. If one of us fell, the man carrying this coin had to show up. No questions, no hesitation. "And all those guys today came because of one call?" Ethan asked. Sam gave a small smile. "They didn't come for the call. They came for what it stands for what we still share even after all these years." Max lifted his head like he understood every word. Ethan leaned down and petted him gently, with respect. The German shepherd closed his eyes for a moment. In that gesture, something started to shift. "Why'd you give it to me?" Ethan pressed. Sam pulled an old lighter from his pocket. He flicked it on and off slowly, like an old ritual. "Because the world doesn't need more soldiers," he said. "It needs men who remember." Ethan went quiet. His fingers tightened around the coin. His eyes weren't a teenager's anymore. They belonged to someone who, for the first time, understood the weight of a family name. Max got up and sat beside Ethan. He wasn't looking for affection. He was offering protection. He'd accepted him. Ethan was his new guard. Sam placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder and whispered, "You won't always understand the path, but as long as you've got Max, you'll never be alone." At the diner's entrance, Maggie watched the scene silently, like time itself paused out of respect. And outside, the sound of old motorcycles faded into the distance. But the legacy, that was just beginning. Night fell over Willow Creek, with a thick blanket of stars, like the whole sky had decided to listen to the memories about to be shared. Maggie's diner, now lit by warm lamps and candles on the tables, had turned into a haven for stories. The foggy windows showed silhouettes sitting quietly. This wasn't just a gathering. It was a vigil of remembrance. Sam was at his usual table, with Ethan at his side and Max lying between them, in his usual spot but with one ear perked and his nose slightly raised, like he could smell the words before they were spoken. Around them, the veterans who'd shown up that afternoon sat with coffee mugs in their hands. None of them were in a rush. None of them needed to say anything to fill the room with meaning. But then one spoke up. "It was the winter of '52, said George Miller, a thin man with white hair slicked back and a voice rough as old paper. "We were pinned down at Ice Pass in Black Ridge. The enemy held the high ground. They had us surrounded for 3 days. Ethan listened, eyes wide. He'd never seen men this tough talk about something with such care, like every word could break in their mouths. "We lost 16 men that night," George went on. "But the youngest, a kid just 19, stayed behind to cover our retreat. His name was Daniel. We never saw him again. I carried him on my back to camp," said William Harper, his voice low. "He died before dawn. That was the first time I saw Sam cry." Ethan turned to his grandpa, shocked. Sam didn't say a thing. He just stroked Max gently behind the ear, like that touch held all the things he'd never had the courage to say. Then one of the younger veterans, Robert Jenkins, pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside were a handful of worn Brotherhood coins, each one engraved with a name. "This box belongs to Oakwood Squad 4, Robert said. "Every coin here stands for someone who didn't come back. Today, I want Ethan to know them." Max got up and walked slowly to the table. He sniffed the box with respect, then sat down like he was mourning each one. Ethan realized then that his grandpa was never alone. He was surrounded by absences that lived through memories. Sam, staring into the fireplace's glow, finally spoke. "War isn't just about bullets or trenches," he said. "It's about the faces you see every time you close your eyes, the names you can't forget, the silences that stay with you when everyone thinks you're at peace." A single tear rolled down Ethan's cheek, not from sadness, from understanding. Maggie, watching from the counter, poured more coffee. Nobody saw her cry, but her hands shook as she held the pot. Max settled beside Ethan, his eyes closed, his breathing steady, like he knew the weight was finally being shared. And in that warm glow of coffee, wood, and memory, the stories found rest. Because sometimes all a man needs is to be heard. Dawn was just starting to spread its first rays over Willow Creek. The town, still asleep, let out wisps of mist from dew-soaked rooftops. The air was cold but not biting, a breeze that whispered to old souls that a new cycle was coming. Behind Maggie's diner, a small garden of wild roses served as a private retreat. There, Sam sat on a wrought-iron bench, wrapped in his old military coat. Across from him stood Ethan, holding the Brotherhood coin now hanging from a leather cord around his neck. He studied it, like a compass in a desert. Max paced slowly between them, sniffing the flowers marking the ground, but also moving with a calm ease, like this garden was now part of his mission. Every so often, he brushed his nose against Ethan's hand, as if to say, "I'm here." Don't forget who's by your side. You don't have to wear it if you're not ready, Sam said, his voice softer than usual. Ethan shook his head. It's not about being ready, he said. It's about choosing not to be like those who don't listen. I want to wear it how to learn to listen better. Sam smiled. Not big, not showy. A small smile heavy with pride. When I was your age, I thought I knew what strength was, Sam said. But I learned real strength starts when you admit you need others. Ethan sat beside him. For a moment they didn't speak. They just watched the sky lighten, painted in shades of purple and amber. The day was born with a quiet dignity. Max lay down between them, his head on Sam's boots. His eyes were closed, but his ears still twitched, catching every sound, like he knew something important was being sealed in that shared silence. Do you regret anything, Grandpa? Ethan asked, breaking the stillness carefully, like he didn't want to shatter glass. Sam took his time answering. I regret not speaking up sooner, he said, keeping the stories locked away like wounds you hide. I didn't realize that sometimes telling what you lived through can keep others from suffering the same. Ethan lowered his head, thoughtful. Do you think I can do something with all this? He asked. Sam looked at him. For the first time, he didn't see a boy. He saw a young man ready to honor his name. Yes, Ethan, he said. You can remember. You can speak. You can care. And most importantly, you can walk with Max. He'll teach you more than I can now. Right then, as if he understood, Max stood and placed his front paw on Ethan's leg. It wasn't a trained move, it was a silent vow. Sam watched them, his heart full. He didn't cry, but his eyes, clear as mountain ice, shimmered with a quiet moisture only the greatest men are allowed to show. Now, Sam murmured more to himself than to them, I can rest. The sun finished rising, and in the new light 3 shadows stretched across the grass. An old man, a young man, and a dog who tied them together without a single word. The town square in Willow Creek woke up with a different feel. One by one, folks stepped out of their homes in simple but dignified clothes. Some carried wildflowers, others held small flags folded into triangles. It wasn't an official ceremony, no officials or cameras, but deep in the town's heart, everyone knew this day would be remembered forever. Samuel Carter, the last brave man of Oakwood Squad 4, stood in the center of a small wooden platform, shaded by a 100-year-old oak. He wore his uniform pressed with care, his veteran's cap tilted just right, and his walking stick in hand, not a sign of weakness, but of hard-earned strength. At his side, standing tall like a sentinel, was Max, his fur gleaming, a blue ribbon around his neck, not for show, but a quiet symbol of his new mission, to guard his partner's memory until his final breath. Ethan stood beside him, quiet, but proud. The brotherhood coin hung around his neck, out in the open, worn with honor, like it was part of his skin now. His eyes stayed on his grandpa, but also on Max, learning from every silent gesture. People gathered quietly, forming a natural semicircle. Maggie stood at the diner's entrance, holding a bouquet of dried flowers she'd kept for years. The veterans who'd come from far away were together again, this time not in uniforms, but with open hearts. Sam looked up. His voice, though aged, still carried weight. Today we don't celebrate battles won, he said. We celebrate the names we don't forget. We celebrate the courage of those who choose to live with dignity, even when no one's watching. Max let out a soft huff, his way of backing up those words. He didn't bark, didn't jump, he just stood firm. Sam slowly pulled a small object wrapped in dark cloth from his jacket pocket. He unfolded it and held up a bronze medal, tarnished by time, but still shining at its core. This medal isn't for killing, he said. It's for saving, for carrying a buddy 5 miles under fire. I didn't accept it back then, not out of pride, but grief. Today, I choose to share it. He turned to Ethan and placed the medal in his hands, closing them with his own. It's not a prize, Sam said. It's a promise that you'll protect the memory of those who gave everything, even if they didn't know they'd be remembered. Ethan's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He held the medal, bowed his head and whispered, I promise. Sam turned to Max and with some effort knelt down, pressing his forehead to his loyal friends. The German shepherd stayed still, taking in that final gesture, like he knew their time together was reaching its peak. Good boy, Sam murmured. A soft applause started to grow among the crowd. Not loud, but gentle, respectful, like a breeze through ancient trees. The veterans lined up, One by one, they saluted Sam with the military gesture reserved for those who've stood at the edge of the world. And he, one by one, tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. Returned the salute, tears in his eyes, head held high. When the ceremony ended, Ethan walked through the square with Max at his side. He wasn't just a grandson anymore, he was the keeper of a story, of a name, of a bond, and Max knew it. His walk was different, proud, alert, but lighter, like he knew he wasn't walking for Sam anymore. He was walking for everyone. Sam watched from a distance, sitting on a bench in the square, his face calm, his eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. The sun climbed high. And with it, the legacy of the brave who never stopped fighting. 5 years later, Maggie's diner was still open. The tables had shifted, the wooden chairs were more worn, but the air still held the same warmth that tied generations and silences together. On the main wall there was now a dark-framed picture, a black and white photo of Samuel Carter raising his hand in a military salute, with Max at his side and Ethan behind him, carrying the look of someone who understands more than he says. Sam had passed away peacefully, asleep in his chair under the old oak, with Max lying at his feet. There was no pain, just silence. Max stood watch over his owner for 3 days, until Ethan took him home. They never parted after that. Ethan, now in his early 20s, had chosen a quiet but steady path. He didn't become a soldier, a politician, or a headline hero. He became a storyteller. He traveled small towns and cities in an old pickup truck, carrying books and a wooden box filled with the Brotherhood coins of Oakwood Squad 4. His project, called The Silence Archive, was a mobile library of testimonies, letters, photos, and war memories, not to glorify it but to humanize it. Max was still his constant companion. He didn't run like he used to, and the fur around his muzzle was white, but his presence was unshakable. When kids approached the truck with curious eyes, Max greeted them with a wagging tail, but one signal from Ethan, and he'd snap back to his steady stance, guardian of the memories. One day after a talk at a rural school, a girl with bright eyes asked, "How do you know all this won't be forgotten over time?" Ethan smiled, knelt beside Max, and answered, "Because as long as someone listens, as long as someone cares, as long as there's a dog like him beside a man with purpose, nothing's truly lost." That night, Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was the bronze medal Sam had given him. He held it for a moment, then fastened it around Max's neck. "You're not just a friend," he said. "You're the last soldier of an army that doesn't carry weapons, it carries memories." Max licked his hand and lay down with a long sigh, like he was accepting the new title with a king's dignity. The sky was clear, starry, and the shadows cast by the truck's headlights stretched long across the dirt. Ethan looked up and whispered, "We're keeping it, Sam." And in the distance, the wind rustled through the trees like an almost human reply. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.